Let them dry. Meanwhile, I work on a segment. And I found this to be pleasurable. This is the first one I ever made right here. It's number 3. It was the 3rd bowl I ever made. Because I register my bowls into a little log. I keep up with how many I've made and what I've done and try and improve off of it and get a little better. But this particular bowl right here I made from this material I found on the side of the road. And that's what's so neat about this stuff. You can take a board and turn it into a bowl by doing a little math. And I hated math in school, but I found out that I can use the math, the geometry, and it's not that complicated once you understand the recipe of it all. You got to make sure that you get the segmentations has to be of a particular size every time. And that's where I learned to make my own tools that I have. You can buy an Inca like this right here to make your cuts with and get by with it, or you can make your own. I don't use this thing. I like it for certain parts, but what I use to make my segmentation cuts is something that a guy named Jerry Bennett I capitalized on, and I got on YouTube and learned how to make this, and I can get perfect cuts with this every time. I'll take a minute and show y'all. I can't really cut on this because my saw is left-handed, and this is not a left-handed saw, and it's designed for my saw. But you can see how it works in a second when I show it. How many of y'all do segment turning? It's fun. It's like a puzzle. It's challenging. I enjoy it, but it's not necessarily enough to make it. They don't stay. I'm gonna put it over here. Y'all know who I am now. But like these two boards right here are exactly what I cut to make this bowl right here. This is Canary and Purdue, and I use about that much material. The base is not. The base is made of this material here, which I have no idea what it is. But it turns.
It's fogwood.
Fogwood. That's what I label on too.
Found on ground.
In my logs, I always write what I make, and fog's what I put down because I have no idea what that stuff is. But I also have a lot of fun making the tools that I have to make the segmented cuts with, and like this right here, that, along with some other things, it kind of adds to it. But I'll start off, if you want, I'll pass these out, because I know none of y'all are going to remember any of these things. You'll pass one around to everybody. I wrote down the websites of the 3 people that I mostly follow that helped me to learn how to do this on there. Jerry Bennett's one of them. There's an old Navy guy in there that he does open segments, and I've done 2 open segments. They're harder to understand. Earl Small. Jerry Bennett is an artist and a musician, and he got into this and he developed that, and he does it as a hobby as well, and he makes some fantastic stuff. You get on the website and look him up. Dave Mueller, M-U-E-L-L-E-R, he taught how to make this from Jerry Bennett. But his name is not on there. I didn't write it down there. But if you follow Jerry Bennett, you'll find Dave on there as well. But I'm going to try and go over the basics and not make this thing complicated so that you don't feel like you're in school. But you start off with the base. You come up with a design that you want. You can get on a computer, and they've got all kinds of stuff out there that you can make different designs and shapes using these pre-made dimensions. I've never done that. I basically start off with an idea, and I'll draw it out on paper, and I'll do a side design of it. This particular one right here was this bowl right here that I made for my wife a couple of years ago. And when I drew it out, if you'll notice, there's little squares straight across through there, loads of rings. And I make the base first, this being the base, whatever material you use as a substrate. Start off with the base, then I measure across it. And when you measure across it, you just basically get your diameter. So for an example, I pre-made one so I didn't have to do a bunch of cutting. If you take the diameter of this wood, and on this one I think this one here is 9 3/8 across through there. take that diameter and you go through your basic geometry of diameter times pi, 3.14. That'll give you the circumference of what you're gonna have, which is 29.43 inches. Take that circumference and divide it by 16, which is what I'm gonna be cutting these into, 16 segments. And that gives me the size, and then I take my caliper, measure the length of it, and that will come out to this 1.83, I think it is. Yeah, and that's it. That way I can come up with the size ring that I want. You glue the rings and you stack the rings until you get the shape. So now you have made your own piece of wood, and you turn this out. They're relatively easy to turn out. When you turn these things out, it starts out looking jagged like that, and you've got this thing turning on your lathe, and I've had chunks this big, like this piece right here. You're turning that thing, and you think, God, that thing's gonna fly all over the place. It cuts like butter. It is so easy to cut these things down. And you say you've done a few of them?
Yeah, and I've done more half segments.
And glue the segments together.
Glued those big segments and then glued them up so they weren't as small as those.
Yeah. I've done different sizes, different shapes, and different ones, but I was just wanting to do a little basic fundamental on these things. Before I start doing that, I'll try and show you upright how this works. Jerry Bennett come up with this novel idea where you don't have to do a bunch of math calculations like I just spit out just then. And if you buy from him, you don't have to. You got somebody that knows has a CNC machine. They can cut them. I usually use the 16-inch segments. This one right here. It's already cut, designed, the measurements there. I don't have to do a bunch of math. All I have to do is know what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a ring. And I jump over, decide what size I'm going to go with, and it's usually 16. Put this in between this thing, and I'll hold it up so y'all see it. It doesn't have to be measured from here to here. You're not. This thing measures itself. Once you make one of these, that thing's set up. Now, what you do, this goes into it, and the distance between the saw blade and the cut that you need, which is 1.83, you set this up 1.8 from the blade, and you run this at an angle through there, and it'll cut the segments exactly the same way each time. Now, I'm not doing it on the machine here because it's not set up right, but that's basically how I cut those. And you cut through this way, then once you make your cut, flip it over, and come back through there, make the second cut, come back. You do it until you get 16 pieces, then you got a perfect ring there. Once you get the ring cut, they'll look like this. You got to sand them and bring them together. I made a little table to work off of, and I set up a little board, and like a prisoner, I stand here and sand these things until I knock off the little fur off each one. Then I'll glue them together on here. And these guys that are on YouTube, they make it look so easy, and it really isn't hard at all. And if you're by yourself and you're fooling with these things, it's kind of pleasurable, like I tell everybody, it's the drug of choice that I do nowadays. Earl Small talks about if you take the glue and you rub it together, hold it for just 10 seconds, it's set. Everybody thinks you got to do a bunch of crazy stuff with it. You don't. You rub it together and there's a chemical reaction that occurs with this white glue. Now, it's not cured, but it's set. Now, because I pre-cut these before I came up here, you didn't have to listen to the noise and smell the dust.
Sorry about that.
Come on in, guys, we got more coming.
What do you got down there on the bottom for your things? Is it just
Wax
self-paint,
paper.
wax paper?
Now, Earl Small come up with this tool. There's band them together like this if you want to. Some people take a rubber band and they'll put a rubber band around them and hold them together. But I like Earl's little idea, and I made this. All I did was took a piece of hard wood, run a string inside of it, drilled a hole into it. And his little idea works pretty good too. Tie a knot on the end of it. And there's a little notch that I put in on the end so the screwdriver can rest in it. And that holds it pretty good. It just locks around, there's nothing fancy. You adjust them up so that it can sit and cure. And now what I do for my curing form to make sure everything's good and straight, I'll sit. I made a little press out of this. I've got a bolt down in the bottom of this thing. Sitting on wax paper. And I'll let it sit for a couple hours and take this off and relax it. And it'll be pressed out flat across the top. And I'll make my ring. Sit that out of the way for now. And once you got your rings, you start, you've got to get all your rings, I number them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just like in this little drawing right here. Each one of these represent a ring on through there, and I numbered them. Sand them flat, keeping the number on the inside so I'll know which one's which, and then I can start stacking them. Develop a shape that I want. Just like stones, you want to offset the joints in between them, but these have got to be good and flat, and I sand them. I made a sander for my lathe that is a drum. Taking 4-inch PVC, and I put it in between there, and I made the box so that the drum sits inside of it. And I've got it to where it'll adjust the sander up and down, the drum up and down. So when I run this across it, I'm running it across it this way, and I make a little handle that lays down flat, just as like a trowel. Push it across, and it'll get it good and flat.
You need to send us a picture of that.
I made it when I started doing these because I couldn't afford paying $1,000 for one of those. And what I did was took a 4-inch piece of PVC. I got on the internet and I found that Grizzle had a drum sander, and you could buy the replacement pad. And what I did was I wrapped it around that 4-inch. It works great. I milled off 2 pieces of poplar to stabilize the ends. I shove it into my lathe on one side, bring up the tailstock on the other. I made this big box that it sits down into so that I have a tabletop. The drum turns around and around. You bring these across through there until you get them good and flat. This one has gone through that drum sander, and you can see where this little spot was just not quite there. This is a reject from another project. At any rate, however you do it, there's other ways of doing it. I also made a 12-inch sander that I use on my lathe. Same concept. I have a box around it. I made it out of MDF, flat material. Went to Harbor Freight, got the sanding disc for like $7, 3 of them, just pads. Put them on there, and I've got a 12-inch sander using my lathe. And if you buy one, they're like $700. I might have $25 in that car. That's what I used to sand these with. Once you get them all sanded up, then you can start the gluing process. I usually use my lathe to glue it all up, because I'll mount it on the lathe, bring up one ring at a time, and I usually have a flat board in between there, and I press it against there, because you want to keep these things centered. You can't have them offset from each other, they gotta be centered. There's no better way than use your own lathe. The lathe is gonna dead center that. You'll have a registration point on here, you bring it up on the lathe. On the other side, you make a registration plate and you bring it in. And once you get them all stacked up, then you're ready to turn. From there, the sky's the limit. As you see on some of these things that I've made through here, this was the first one, you know, pass it around and feel it. It weighs nothing. It's very light.
Is all your rings the same size, or some of them bigger around?
Well, that's what I was talking about, that piece of paper that I gave you. You're gonna determine the design you want. Say your wife wants you to make something a particular size. You shape on paper what you want, the size that you want.
Yeah.
Come up with your own idea of how the shape's gonna be. I like to draw a side view of it, and then I'll measure up. Of course, that's not existing at this point. I'll measure up from there to
hold it
base up. And from there, I'll start counting the rings. All right, I gotta have this ring this many. And as you've designed and measured it off, say you want it 9 inches at the bottom, 12 inches at the top. From there, you use the math that I gave you there to design the ring. And each ring will represent that particular segment.
So your top ring on that was actually bigger than the bottom
Oh,
ring
yeah,
to start with?
yeah, this one's 13 inches here, and down here at the bottom, it's 8.5.
Yeah, I just didn't know if you made them all the same size.
But they're all 16-inch segments as I made them on here. But now, with Jared Bennett's, with Jared Bennett's style, you can go 24, 16, 32, 48, any segments you want. And each one of his segments has a degree on there. So on like 16 pieces is 22.5 degree angle.
And you got that from him?
I ordered it from him, but you don't have to. You know, you can make your own. You can take a protractor and make your own. You know, a lot of people do that, MDF or something, a dense material. But that one right there, I got a little crazy and started playing with plywood and just shift the rings around. And the rings, shifting them around, the same concept there. It's a ring. You can count each one of them as they come up through there. It's just that I kind of let the wood lead me when I made these, because I didn't know what I was getting into. I thought, well, I'll just make a ring this way and I'll add an inch to it and keep on until I got a shape, and then I'll true it up with my machine. Man, that stuff got heavy. Now fill this one. And that's kind of fun, man.
Pretty.
Is that plywood hard to turn?
It's as easy as it can be. Most of this stuff is a lot easier than a solid piece of wood. If you put a piece of pear or oak on your lathe, it's gonna be heavy and hard to turn. But
I've heard of some people lately that are making pens out of plywood.
well, that's birch plywood there, because it doesn't have so many
That's beautiful.
open spots inside of it like American plywood that we use for construction. You know, there's little pockets and inclusions and all that, but it's
Just as an aside, I was cutting some plywood on my laser cutter the other day, and when I went to take two pieces apart, they wouldn't quite come apart, and there was a little piece of metal in that
in the plywood.
Yeah.
If you've ever seen this, and I've had the opportunity, and I know Tim has quite a bit, to go watch him make plywood, it's an amazing process. It takes several people to make plywood. You make MDF, it only takes about 6 or 8 people, but plywood takes, what, a couple hundred people to make plywood, because there's so much involved in it. Your taking a log and you're turning that log down to make the thin stock, and each one has to be separated, and then you crisscross the grains, and they're trying to salvage and use everything they can, so that's why you got pockets and inclusions in it, and that sort of thing. But,
Did you glue your faceplate up? How did you mount it to your headstock? Did you glue it to a glue plate?
well, normally what I start off myself, I found, you can see it on the bottom here, I'll take the base and I'll treat it like a solid piece of wood. There's two ways of doing it, and I've done it both ways. You can make it with a floating bottom, or you can make it with a solid. I like the solid. I tried the floating one and I didn't care for it. When I do, I'll let my chuck, I'll make it where I can continue adding it to the chuck, taking it off the chuck, and then until I get down to the part where I'm finishing off the bottom, and then I'll do a decorative change-up on there. But when this was being made, I had a 50 millimeter chuck that sat in there and it recessed inside there, and that's where I start off. From there, that was my registration point, because then the rings glued to it, and each ring glued to the next ring, to the next ring. And,
Because I had taken a sacrificial piece and glued,
I don't
and then
usually
worked
do the sacrificial, but a lot of people do. Yeah, that's not uncommon at all. I don't particularly care for the sacrificial on there because I want a solid piece on there.
No, I glued a solid piece to the sacrificial
Yeah.
and turned everything. The only thing was is a pain in the butt is I had to use those coal jaws to finish the bottom of it with it.
Well, I've gone into the vacuum chuck and I've used the coal jaws probably on this one. I made my own big one.
Yeah.
And it's like a dinosaur. It sits on the top of my rafters now. I don't use that thing at all anymore. But anyway,
How are you determining the width of the
width,
the layers? Yeah.
that has to do with your own design. If you
But how
want-
much, I mean, there's gotta be a certain amount of minimum overlay for gluing purposes
Well-
to hold it together.
When I made that very first one, if you noticed, it was quite thin in between here. I didn't design this as much as I let the wood design it for me. So I learned off of this one how to allow enough room in there. I try to allow a minimum of a 1/2 inch on each side, minimum. But in most cases, I try to run on up to 3/4 inch thickness in there so that I have enough room to shape it a little bit to my desire. So it's just a matter of getting the feel. Once you do one, you kind of understand what I'm talking about. It starts coming clear to you how much you put in there. Now, if you get on those computer laid out designs that I've seen on the internet, my brain can't comprehend what all they're talking about, but they want you to have a particular depth between here as well. But I generally go with a 1.5 inch width stock. Let's see the stock now. 1.5 inch wide, here it is. And the thickness varies, just depending on what you purchase. I buy boards like this, the old ones when I got them on sale, I stick them in my box at the house. I got a whole stack of them. When I come up with a particular design, I usually cut them on 1.5 inch, and I like working the 16 inch, so I make the same thing every time. Just like this. This one and this one are the same as this one. They're all the same as far as the way I made these. You can go different. I've done 24 inch, and they get crazy. I don't know if I answered your question or not.
Yeah.
But anyway, after you've got your rings together, you glued them up, you come into the shape. This is a good example. Like this one, I did 2 different molds in there. Once I made the bottom, then I made the top, then I mated them together. But I also bought a $5 lamp from the thrift shop and built this around the lamp. So I didn't use a plan. I used all thread inside of it, just like the lamp hardware was on it. And this is made out of coffee and pear. Straight out of the woods, right there. And this is pear down here. And they're natural in color. They They're not dyed or anything like that, so some people say it's pretty, some people say it's tacky. I found it to be challenging. I enjoy doing it, so.
What kind of finish do you put on that?
I usually use just a friction polish on there. I'll sand it down to the finest that I can get to them, and then I'll put a friction polish that I make myself, just like the Mylars out there. And so everything you see here is its natural color. There's nothing stained on it. This is not segmented in the sense of these, but they are in the sense of like a barrel. I want people to understand that we've been dealing with segmented material for a long time, because look at what a Cooper did with a barrel. You know, those were all segmented as well. This one right here was challenging to me, but it was fun. This is 2 thicknesses of that plywood, of that walnut. I crisscrossed them and made it into my own personal plywood, but using the same setup that I was doing with that. I made it into little pie shapes. And then I made the molding by gluing the same thing on top of it, and then when I cut it on the lathe, I cut the molding straight into the wood, but you can see all the pie shapes as they come around through there. And 2 different layers of it, so that would give it some strength and durability to it. But that's a mimic of a federal mural. This should be pretty well set up when I move it out now. And I know that what I crammed at you in just a few minutes is not exactly what you would see, but I encourage you to look at the YouTube videos. People like Jerry Bennett can make this stuff look so easy, and he's the one that kind of dogged me into going into it a little further. I called and talked with Earl Small. He didn't get into doing segmented turning until he was retired from the Navy. And he made a bowl in his carport, and he won a show and got enough money to buy his first lathe with. He was using an old, wore-out lathe in his carport. Now he's got a YouTube show, and he's got a storefront in Carolinas where he sells his stuff out of it, and he's in his mid-80s. And he didn't get into this until about 7 years ago. So it'll draw you into it if you ever take the time to try it. And I strongly encourage people to try it. Something new, it's different. But that's about it.